Hello again, everyone. This is Chad Rogers. I'm your host, and welcome back to Hard to Be Human. Today, I have with me Kim Cloud, and she is going to be sharing some of her story with us. Kim, just in the paper that I sent you, I asked you to fill out and tell me a little bit about your story. You
hmm
mentioned growing up with just getting a kind of a poor education. So, can you tell us a little bit about some of your childhood and the education that you did or did not receive, I guess?
the did not receive is a very long list, but
Yeah.
basically, my father was a truck driver, and so they opted to air quotes homeschool me because he was very anti-vaccination, so he didn't want to get me vaccinated for school, so they just opted to homeschool me. But it wasn't through any kind of a program, any kind of accreditation. It was just basically them going to Sam's Club and getting those workbooks that were by grade, and they would just give them to me and with little guidance and say, okay, do this. And that was basically it up until I was 16, I think, when I started remedial classes to get my GED.
Okay. All right. So really almost like self-education in the sense of they just gave you that book and then that was
Yeah,
it. So
that was
no
it.
no guidance at all.
No, it
Okay.
was so bad that I really couldn't multiply when I was 15. Like zero math
Okay.
skills, had no idea about history, most of sciences. The only thing I was ever really, really good at was reading comprehension.
Right. Right. Because you mentioned also that you're trying to do some writing. And so obviously
Yeah.
reading is a kind of a passion. Did that start developing when you were younger or?
Very young. My reading materials was very limited, but one of the things I did have when I was younger was those Disney read-alongs, if anyone remembers those. It was the Disney storybooks with a cassette that read it to you. And it was with those that I taught myself how to read.
Right.
And so with those, that's when I really started loving to read because it kind of gave me an escape. Um, but again, my reading materials available at home are very limited. But I started writing creatively around 12, 13 years old.
Right. Because you mentioned you wanted to be in the fantasy world
Yes.
of writing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I actually really like fantasy books as well. It's kind of my escape when I don't want to read anything
hmm
serious. That's what I use. So
Yeah.
yeah. And you mentioned here too that your cousin was really the only person that you knew that was your own age. Were you guys
hmm
living like in a really secluded place or?
No, we lived in Fort Smith the majority of my life. There was a span of about 10 years we lived in Sallisaw, Oklahoma. But other than that, they didn't have me in any programs. The only family we really saw were my grandparents and my aunt and my cousin. And my cousin's a year and a half younger than me. Other
Okay.
than that, it was mostly just immediate family and not very many of them.
Right. And do you still have contact with your family?
Some of them, not all of them.
Right, because you mentioned also in the page just some verbal abuse.
Yes.
Like, what would you
There was
share?
go ahead.
Yeah, no, just what were you going to share?
Well, there was all the types of abuse. It was verbal, it was physical, it was sexual, it was psychological, it was all there. So isolation was a huge part of that. And I didn't really realize how badly I was isolated until I was a little older. And it was a learning curve to learn how to be social with people my age and social with people that weren't in my immediate circle. But yeah, there was a lot of that up through 15 when my father left.
Okay, all right. That's what I was going to ask is just kind of when, if that, you know, kind of ended. So, but
hmm
that's went on for several years then.
Yeah, my father left when I was 15. That's when the majority of the abuse ended. However, my mother is very manipulative, so there was still some psychological manipulation and abuse going on even after that.
Right. Okay. It's always difficult, I think, when you hear somebody sharing the story, because your family is supposed to be like your protection. It's supposed to be, the best part of that part of your life there. And when you don't
hmm
have that, now you said here that you've got a couple of kids now as well.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
I have a
And
soon to be 14-year-old, soon to be 15-year-old. Actually, my 15-year-old's turning 15 tomorrow.
okay. All right. That's
So
awesome.
yeah, they
Yeah.
keep me busy.
Well, and you said something about breaking the chains and breaking the
Yes.
cycles. Yeah, and I know a lot of people deal with that. A lot of people are looking from that past and they have those issues. It's something we talked about
Hmm.
in a previous podcast was that a lot of times the abused become abusers. And obviously,
Hmm.
was that a struggle for you? I think mentally when you were going to have kids, did you worry that that might be something you'd struggle with?
It was a huge worry because I did some genealogy research into my both sides of my family, and it was very generational through my father's side. His father was abusive, and it goes back generations
Right.
of just very hostile individuals. So I was worried about that. Um, but I used my parents' actions and words as kind of a guide of what not to do. I knew what kind of parent I didn't want to be. And it's been some trial and error through there, but otherwise, it's my kids seem fine. I haven't messed them up too bad yet.
Well, and perfectly good having, if you come from a perfectly good background, it's still hard to raise kids. I mean, it's just a challenge. So that's really amazing, though, just like you say, with the struggles that you've got. And it's also really, it's good to hear you say, that that's something that you worried about because it's, obviously something you didn't want for your children, but
Right.
that's a difficult chain to break.
It is.
Um, yeah,
It's taken a lot of work and a lot of self awareness and being able to address when I'm in the wrong and when I'm perpetrating habits that I saw growing up rather than acting on my own accord.
right. Right. Now, you also mentioned here being motivated
Mm-hmm.
to get that education.
Yes.
Obviously, you said you're working on your doctorate.
Yes.
What field, like what kind of doctorate are you working on?
I'm working on a PhD in English, and I have a master's degree in English and creative writing.
Okay.
So I want the doors open for in the future if I want to teach at a college level full time. But the ultimate goal has always been to work in fiction publishing at some point.
Okay. All right. But there, going back to the motivation, uh, just tell us a little bit about what motivated you to break all the chains and pursue
Yeah.
that level of education. That's intense, especially when you've got teenagers. That's
Yeah.
intense. Yeah.
Well, it started from the lack of education that I had. I've always been curious and asking questions, even when I wasn't supposed to, and even when I got in trouble for asking questions.
Yeah.
Um, so I've always loved learning, and like I said, my reading comprehension has always been something that's been high, and I've always sought reading. But when I took my GED test and then decided I wanted to go to college, because one, my mother never my mother never went to college. She graduated high school. My father never got past the eighth grade, so neither one of them went past any kind of just preliminary schooling. But growing up, part of that verbal abuse was being told I was too stupid to do anything. I was too dumb to achieve anything. And kind of laying the majority of my worth, another air quotes, worth, um, basically to just my body. And that was it. So I strived, whatever context you want to use, to better my intellect, to improve my education and prove them wrong. That was my biggest motivator, was proving them wrong. And it's still kind of in me that if someone says I can't do something, I'm going to do it. So that it's still kind of a motivator, though going past bachelor's degree has been more for me rather than them.
Right. When did you start college? Like, how old were you?
I was 19 when I initially started college in '09. I had to drop out for 3 years when I got pregnant with my second child because he was a complicated pregnancy. So I went back in 2015 and completed my bachelor's degree in 2018.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
And then you got your master's and you're working on your PhD. How much more you got
Mhm.
on your PhD?
I just started in January, so I have
Okay.
about 2.5 years left for my
Right.
PhD. For my PhD.
Okay. Anything else as far as like motivation? I know you mentioned there, just kind of trying to prove them wrong that you were,
Yeah,
capable and your worth was more than what they said it was.
yeah, and that's even though I don't talk to either of them. I haven't talked to my mother in well over 10 years, and of course, I haven't talked to my father since he left 21 years ago. But even though I still don't have contact with them, that's still a motivator, is to prove to myself that they're wrong and to prove to my kids that what people say about you does not dictate who you choose to be and who you can be.
Right. Okay. So that's still motivating you. And your
Oh yeah.
kids, they're motivating you too at all, or
Yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah.
Um, I mean, both me and their dad have college degrees, but they they look on me differently than what I looked at on as my parents. And so I just want to make them proud of me because I know I'm not at all proud of mine. So I want to be different in that respect. And I want them to be able to say, that's my mom. And I'm proud to say that's my mom. And
Right.
part of that is improving my education.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Um, you talked about you still struggle with some PTSD. Can you tell
Mm-hmm.
us anything
Quite a
about
bit.
anxiety, depression, any of that?
I've been in and out of counseling and therapy since I was 13. Initially, when I was diagnosed with depression, I wasn't diagnosed with PTSD until my mid 20s. But my father said, "Oh, it's just a phase. She'll grow out of it." And even the doctor looked at him like he was crazy. Um, but I take regular medications for depression and anxiety. But for the most part, it's been through counseling and just being self aware that I've managed my symptoms. I still have flashbacks. I know my triggers for those flashbacks, so I try to avoid them at all possible. I still have nightmares, flashback nightmares frequently from different things, and it's just managing the aftermath of those. And then I am also aware of um, when my symptoms are onsetting for like anniversaries, for because for whatever reason your mind, whether you want it to or not, remembers when something happens and when it's an anniversary of the thing. And I
Oh,
just had one this past month. And even though I wasn't thinking about it, I wasn't conscious about it, my body was starting to become tense. I was becoming more stressed. My anxiety was higher. I started having more nightmares about a week before the actual date. So it's those things that I have to keep in mind and also make the people closest to me aware of, because I can control it to a certain extent through all the therapy I've been through, but there's to an extent where it is a little bit out of my control. But I manage it as best as I can from that.
right. Well, it's a little surprising that you went into any kind of therapy, it sounds like when you were younger, because
Mm-hmm.
your parents were so, it sounds like they were really controlling, like they very
Yes.
much,
Yeah.
yeah.
The reason it became a thing when I was 13 is my grandparents said something, because
Um,
my grandparents, and this is my mother's parents, I was very close with my grandfather. And anytime we would go over to their house, he and I would go out on their back porch while he smoked his pipe and we would just chat. And he would ask and he would check on me. He was pretty much the only one that did. And I guess I said something that kind of tipped him off that something was off. And the next thing I know, my mother is upset that I told my grandfather something, but they were basically pressured into taking me to a doctor and getting me diagnosed basically, and then starting medication. And then from there, he also pressed for me to be in therapy.
right. Okay.
So otherwise, I
That
don't think they would have done anything.
right, yeah, because I was surprised when you said that, and that's what, yeah, that makes quite a bit of sense. And my one of my grandfathers smoked a pipe, and so I have fond memories of
Mm-hmm.
that too.
I can
So
still smell the tobacco he used.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So you talked some about, you still have the nightmares and the trauma, and
Mm-hmm.
you said here healing is not linear.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
what exactly do you mean by it's not linear?
It's not a straight, easy to follow, easy to prescribe or predict line. Healing looks different for everybody. Like for me, I've always been more self-aware than most. My therapists have mentioned that a couple of times. And I actively seek out psychological research to try to understand why things are happening, or I think the way I do or I act the way I do, and I've tracked it back to certain instances in my past. So that's been part of the healing, is understanding where these habits come from and where these thought processes come from. But I also know people that have been in similar situations that they don't have that awareness. So healing is different for everybody, and therefore it's not always straightforward. And I backslide a lot. Like I go into depressive episodes still where I question my worth and I question whether or not my children are better with me there or not. But I always bring myself back in some way, whether it's through a little bit of extra medication or it's through reaching out to my friends and letting them know I'm struggling and they help pull me back. But healing looks different for everybody and it's nowhere near predictable or textbook.
Right. Now, you just mentioned having some friends that you reach
Mm-hmm.
out to, so obviously you're not alone any longer. Is there
No.
anything you can tell us about your support group that you've got?
The two that I have the closest bonds with kind of came out of nowhere. I returned to college in 2015, and both of them, we had classes together. So we met in college. And at first, and this is the funniest story that we love telling, we thought each other were the meanest, most horrible people because we had the mega, as people call resting bitch face, RBF.
Yeah.
All three of us have it. And so we thought each other were the most terrible people until we started talking. And once we started talking, we're like, oh crap, we're more alike than we thought. And ever since then, we've been glued at each other's hips. Now, granted, one of them lives in Washington State, but I've gone twice now to see her. And the three of us, we could call or text at any time of the day, night. We'll drop anything to go to each other to support each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
So those two have been my biggest supporters and my biggest go-tos in the last 10, 11 years.
Okay, so that's a very long standing friendship then. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really great. Like you say, you've got to have that support group and just
Yes,
finding those people.
yes,
So, and the people that know so that they can help you as you're working through this.
yep.
Um, you talk a little bit too about, and you've mentioned your self-worth a couple of
Mm-hmm.
times. Um, is there anything that you could tell, people who maybe they're having the same kind of experience that you are, they've had
Mm-hmm.
those experiences. Is there anything that you can tell them that can maybe help them think about their self-worth? Like, what do you think about when you think about your own self-worth?
One of the things, and this was told to me by a counselor 20 years ago, I guess, but it stuck with me still, is reminding myself that my thoughts, how did she put it? My thoughts aren't always reality. So what I think about myself is not always factual. A lot of the times, what I think of myself is just a broken record on repeat of what my parents told me or what other people have told me throughout my life. And it's not really what is true. So I constantly have to remind myself of that. But part of coping with that self worth and building a better self worth is having a support system that can back you up when you're in your weak points. But also finding what you love and what you're good at. Like I never thought I'd work in higher education. But now that I'm here, I can't see myself doing anything else. And that's become part of my self worth is that I am good at my job and I am good at learning and I am good at different aspects of my job. And apparently I'm a decent mom because my kids still claim me. So it's those things that kind of build my positive self-worth, and stuff that I have to remind myself of when the negativity kind of pokes its head up.
Right. And that happens pretty frequently, or
Not as frequent as it used to, but it's still there. There's still a lot of second guessing. There's still a lot of, is this really, am I really worth this? Do I really deserve these good things? There's still a lot of that. The biggest thing I've tried to do is just not let it control me.
right. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, if for anybody who's ever struggled with any kind of depression or anxiety, you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
triggers a while ago.
Yes.
Once you've learned those and you can, you can see them coming, and like you said, try to avoid them.
Try to
Um,
avoid them. Yep.
yeah, but mostly just, I mean, really focusing in on, like you said, the good things
Mm-hmm.
as well. I don't know that any of us necessarily deserve the good things. You know, maybe somebody's better than I am and they actually deserve it.
Hmm.
But, that's part of, that thinking process in there too. So,
Yeah.
yeah. If you were going to give any kind of words of encouragement to people who have, it's kind of a similar story to you, like what
Hmm.
would you tell somebody that you think might be going through this as well?
Uh, their situation is going to be different. Their healing will be different. The way they process and think of things will be different. But the biggest pieces of advice I can give is find your support. And if it's hard meeting people, then start with a therapist and then see what the therapist thinks as far as maybe joining a club nearby or an activity. But find your people, whatever that looks like for someone, whether it's family, friends, a professional. You've got to have support from somewhere. um, from there, it's be honest with yourself and what you think, what you feel, and don't shove it in a closet or shove it in a box. That's one of the worst things someone can do is compartmentalize it to a point where you're ignoring it. So don't ignore it, and don't ignore the signs when you see it or when you feel it. And if you struggle with identifying them, again, a professional can help with that. But the biggest thing is being open and honest with yourself on your thought processes, your feelings, what you really think about things, and being able to challenge yourself to change, to make the changes if necessary.
Yeah,
So,
like you said, break those chains that
mm-hmm.
were just generational for you. But
Yeah,
then, like you say, that was part of your job here.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. Because I was very aware that since I was so isolated, the likelihood of me repeating my parents' decisions and actions were higher. I had no other buffering other than my grandfather, and he passed away when I was 16. So I lost that pretty early in the process, and that was a really dark period when my grandfather died. But beyond that, it's been very self-conscious and aware of, is this me or am I just mimicking what I was raised with? And if the answer is I'm mimicking, then I do the work, and it's not easy, but I do the work to change it because I
right,
don't want to be them in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
right. Like you said, they showed you everything that you didn't
Yep.
want, didn't
It was a
want to
perfect
be.
template of all the don'ts.
Right. All right. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share that you think might be valuable to someone else who's faced these kinds of struggles?
This is probably really cliche, but the biggest thing is people aren't alone. In the darkest times, it feels like you're alone.
Yeah,
And this is way more prevalent than people want to think. Childhood abuse in all forms are is far more prevalent than people want to think. And I think breaking down that stigma is step one, and
yeah,
realizing that it's not uncommon, and it is survivable.
yeah.
So
All right. All right. Because that's one of the things that we talk about, like my wife and I, we talked about there. Um, you know, a lot of times people feel like they're the only ones.
yeah.
She felt a lot of shame because
Mm-hmm.
of the things that she was going through, because she thought that other people weren't going through those things. And it is really important for people to understand that, no, you're not alone. The
Yeah.
other people are dealing with these things too. So, and
Mm-hmm.
here we have in front of us a living, walking, talking example of you can break the chains. So that's really fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Hang on just a second for me. If you found this to be helpful, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on Hard to Be Human.